Every year, the calendar turned and so did their faces, blank, apologetic, a shrug that felt like an invitation to be small. They would mail me a perfunctory card that matched the ones they sent 1,000 other people, with inked apologies and the same handwriting that looped my brother's name in gilded flourishes. They would post dozens of photos of him in tuxedos and muscle cars and on stages, every caption a hymn of pride, every comment dripping with the glow of "we are the family that makes things happen." The truth was simpler and uglier. My brother Ryan was their golden ledger entry, the son whose grades and charisma turned into donations, whose smile opened doors at fundraisers, whose name sounded good in the same breath as the country club's sponsors. Sponsors. My birthdays were an inconvenience. My brother's were a product launch. So I learned early how to fold my disappointment into silence, how to clap hardest for Ryan while my own candle wish disintegrated unlit on another night. And that silence carved me into a quiet person who watched, cataloged, and remembered minutiae the rest of the family preferred to forget. I remembered the way Mother set 2 plates at the table, even when it was only the 3 of us at home. One for her, one for Father, and the third for a glory she'd already assigned to Ryan. I remembered how the envelopes were thicker for him, how the phone calls were longer, sweetened with plans and promises. I remembered the year I turned 13 and came home to find a cake with his face printed on it and 30 of his friends roaring in our living room as my mother laughed as if this were normal. "He likes to share his day with us," she said, and I sat in the back, a slice untouched, while the band took its break and the adults congratulated themselves on how supportive they were. It was small cruelties at first, then habitual neglect. School plays I attended alone because their calendars were full. My graduation where Mother sent a generic bouquet and Ryan's college acceptance celebration that became the family's social highlight for an entire week. I should have left earlier. Maybe then the wound would never have turned into a map, but leaving required money and intention and the kind of blind confidence I didn't have. Instead, I stayed. I smoothed the edges of embarrassments. I learned the art of accommodation. Yet the ledger of slights grew. I watched the way Father flinched when I asked for help with rent, but signed checks for Ryan's business opportunities without so much as an invoice. I watched friendships arranged for Ryan, introductions that read like networking breadcrumbs, senators, real estate developers, influential alumni, while my own network stayed stagnant and threadbare. Each effort getting it became a data point stitched into a costume I wore when family came to town. Smile, compliment the food, take a photo, congratulate Ryan. Underneath, a quiet hunger for recognition. It didn't have to be the parties, just a phone call on my birthday, a cake lit with a single candle, a memory that said, "We see you too." So I began to plan, not in fury at first, but like someone preparing a careful map. I cataloged receipts and invitations. I collected screenshots of Ryan's public life, the way townspeople feted him and how he basked in the reflected light. I documented the favors Mother called in for him, the whispered phone calls Father made with his friends in the boardroom. I noticed patterns, the timings of charity events, the particular Friday nights when the family was most likely to be social media performant, the ways a community swallowed its own hypocrisy. I learned how to listen to silence the way a hunter listens for the step that tells you the deer is near. Over time, my life outside of them got steadier. I had no golden portfolio, but I had 2 things they never valued in the same way: time and an ability to vanish in plain sight. "I'm sorry you felt that way," it read. An apology that assumed her intention was what mattered, not the pattern of hurt she had created. I wrote back once, and my message was not the thing I'd rehearsed for years of private revenge. It was simpler and I think more dangerous. I said I had been seen, that the forgetting had been felt, and that I understood she had limits to what she could change. I wished for nothing grand except truth. In the months that followed, the family's public life frayed. A small investigation into the foundation's expenses surfaced administrative errors and relationship complications. Some donors withdrew support, some called for new audits. Mother stepped down from the chairmanship with a public statement about her priorities and our recalibration. Father took a lengthy leave. Ryan's calendar thinned. He was still Ryan, still charming, still capable, but his orbit shifted. He was no longer the unchallenged center. Thaw. The revenge I had imagined as a tidy collapse became messy, because lives are messy and because people are not only what they do to you, but also what they become when faced with themselves. What surprised me most was how little triumph I felt. The satisfaction of being acknowledged was not the same as gloating. It was quieter and stranger. I had wanted them to see me not as an inconvenience, but as a person who kept score in the only way someone with no sponsor learns to, with memory. When I saw Mother sitting in our old kitchen, turning my birthday card over and over like a magpie with a bright coin, I felt a kind of pity that surprised me. She was older, a little diminished, a woman who had been raised in a world that valued surface and transaction over the invisible engine of domestic love. For all her cruelty, she had also been small in ways that had nothing to do with me. Her own parents had been the sort to teach children to polish silver rather than listen to a child's grief. The family's reckoning forced everyone to feel their omissions, to be less comfortable with the easy bargains they had made. Some men did more than others. I was not naive. Not everyone would step into the light of accountability. A few relatives chose the familiar delusion that preserving face mattered more than truth. They closed ranks and deleted. But some of the people who had come to Ryan's party stayed in my life afterward. A retired teacher who called every year on my birthday whether or not I answered, a neighbor who baked an extra pie, a just because, a friend who asked what I wanted and then actually remembered. I learned, too, that revenge had edges that could be blunt or fine, and I preferred the fine ones. My aim had never been to destroy anyone, only to make room for a life that was not a footnote to someone else's narrative. The final irony, the humane kind that stops you as you think you've been hard enough, was that Ryan, left with less golden light, did something I had not expected. He sought help. Not publicly at first, but in quiet. He started to ask what it meant to be loved without needing an audience. He joined a small therapy group and went to meetings that had nothing to do with fundraising or optics. He called once on my birthday and sang off-key into the phone and asked about my life in a way that was new because it was small and therefore true. We did not become a perfect family after that night. There were still stumbles and old reflexes, but the ledger of silence had been punctured, and where it had been filled with omission, there was now at least an attempt at accounting. In the end, the revenge that had once been a hunger softened into an insistence that people be visible to one another. My story. Every year, my family would forget my birthday while throwing an expensive party for my brother. Is not only about punishment, it's about the human economy of attention. How love is sometimes dispensed like currency and sometimes hoarded like an antique. The power I claimed was not the power to ruin, but the power to be known. I don't tell this as a manual for vengeance. I tell it as a map for anyone who has been systematically overlooked. Catalog the facts, gather witnesses who will not turn away, choose an audience that will hear truth without immediate reflex to protect the comfortable. And then, when the moment comes, speak plainly. Let the evidence do the heavy lifting, and after the reckoning, allow for the possibility of repair. Not because the people who hurt you deserve it, but because you might. The night Ryan's party fell into ruin was the night my childhood became a public document, and with that exposure came a strange, slow mercy. People I had thought would always forget my birthday began, in small ways, to remember it. A text at midnight, a call, a neighbor's cake. The family never returned to the comfortable complacency it had once known. The parties continued, but the performances were less confident now because the audience had learned to watch for truth. As for me, I learned that the most potent revenge was not spectacle, but reallocation, taking energy from the theater of being small and investing it in a life that didn't require applause. I kept living, quietly, marking my birthdays with people who actually showed up, and when I blew out candles, they were flames I had invited, not the ghost of a celebration borrowed by someone else.